Abracadabra, amor, unana, abracadabra, morta ugaga, abracadabra, abra unana. Oh, it's a Victoria. It's Victoria. Every month I like to look at the purchases I made last year, the month that we are currently in, so February of 2024. What did I buy? Did I think it was a good purchase? Just some self-reflection. I find that this has been very helpful for me, not only as a consumer of makeup, but as a content creator. Looking back, was something a good purchase? And in what way was it a good or not a good purchase? I highly suggest tracking things that you buy, even if you're not like tracking them for budgetary reasons, tracking things you buy and then next year look back to see, okay, wait, was that actually a good purchase? And what can I learn from that purchase that I can apply to future purchases in order to not make the same mistake if it was a bad purchase? In February of 2024, I bought 3 different products. And the first thing was the Christian Louboutin Foundation Fetiche. The Christian Louboutin foundation. I ended up getting sick the day after I got it in the mail, and the day that I got it in the mail, I swatched it, and that foundation is really highly fragranced. So I smelled it and it kind of gave me a headache, and I do think I was a little more sensitive to the scent of it simply because I was like on my way to being sick, probably already was sick. So that smell I associated with like kind of the sickness of it, and it was a potent foundation smell. I don't always have an issue with a fragrance being in my foundation. It depends on how potent it is and the longevity of that fragrance after I apply it to my skin. After I felt better, which was like a week or 2 before I put it back on my face, I tried it and there was a couple of things that I didn't like about it. One, the color, I'm not sure I got the perfect match for me, but I thought it was okay enough. The second thing was that the scent did linger like all day. Like I could smell it all day. I don't like that. If you're gonna bother having a fragrance, I need it to dissipate before the time I'm done doing my makeup, or I'm gonna be pretty unhappy with the idea of wearing that foundation. The third thing was that scent reminded me of being sick the couple weeks prior. So it just like wasn't an enjoyable foundation. It was a soft matte foundation, and at that time I was really thinking that that is something that I think I could be into. I tend to like a more glowy finish. I think that's the better way to describe it. I wouldn't say dewy finish is my favorite. I like a real soft glow, ambient blurring finish to my complexion products. And I don't think it was any of those things. And the soft matteness I think sat on my skin not great. There's something about pores, big, large pores, and matte foundations for me that don't personally get along. And the powderiness of the matte finish ends up getting caught in there. And for some reason, with a foundation that has that matteness to it, I can't come back from that on my forehead. But a foundation that I put powder on, sometimes I will get like the little divots that I can see. But normally finishing spray will fix it. But for some reason with a foundation, it doesn't do that. And I felt like that was what was going on with that foundation. My personal experience with using it, I wouldn't say it was great. I'm not sure if I bought it right at launch, so I might have been late already. But by the time I finished trying it enough that I felt compelled to speak on it, it was pretty late in the game. I'm pretty fast and loose on what I will make a dedicated review on. I have found just as a creator, people only want that review right as fast as they can get that review. And if you are like a little bit late or weeks late or a month late, people are not going to watch your dedicated review of it. People might still care, but you need to like incorporate that into other content, or people don't seem to care about it. So what ended up happening with that foundation also happened with a couple other foundations, and then ultimately the video that I made was like me like doing like a foundation roundup of complexion products that I had tried recently, and that ended up being in there. If I break it all down, I actually don't think it was a good purchase overall. I think when I was buying it, my heart was in the right place. It was a luxury foundation. People seem to care about my opinion on foundations. I like luxury formulas typically. I was looking for a soft matte foundation, so I think all of those things were good intentions. I don't think when I hit the buy button that anything had gone awry, but everything that happened after I hit the buy button, the fact that I didn't like the way that the foundation looked at me, the fact that because I got sick and didn't review it for a while, it was like more and more irrelevant. And I don't think that a lot of people are very interested in the Louboutin makeup brand. That was more of a self-curiosity. So it just, you know, I think there was like a lot of things that didn't end up playing out with that. So not a purchase I regret making, but I don't think it was a good purchase. Extrapolating from that, if I want to review a foundation, I have to be very, very passionate about it, or the passion from my audience, my existing audience, has to be incredibly strong to hear my opinion on that for me to buy a foundation, give myself what I see as enough time to actually do a solid review of the product, to then make the content to put out there. Otherwise, buying a complexion product to do its own review is like not something that I'm going to probably do in the future very often, unless something like the Surreal Skin Foundation comes out again. So I did review the Surreal Skin Foundation by Makeup by Mario. I bought it really quickly. I got it really quickly. I tested it really quickly, like over the course of like a week, and I put up a review. And then that way I felt like my audience knows where I was coming from and knew that I was giving it a good solid test before I was speaking on it. That can happen, but I just think when it comes to that kind of thing, it has to be by popular demand, not by my curiosity. Unless like my curiosity, like I'm like incredibly curious. I'm like, I don't understand what that is. I need to figure out what that is. That's like a little bit of a different story, because I also want my channel to include things that I'm curious about, whether or not my audience, or I think an audience outside of my audience will care about. I have to also enjoy the content that I'm making, and not that I don't whenever I'm reviewing something that I might not have been interested in. You know, I think people can tell whenever you're reviewing something out of what your audience wants and when you're reviewing something because you're curious about it. Not my best look, I think. In the polar opposite of a price range, we have the CoverGirl Simply Ageless Powder. This purchase was made for a number of reasons. Someone told me that it was a lot like the Chantecaille powder, which I was really excited about, but also CoverGirl had sent me that skin tint that they released, the one that looked like the Chanel and the Rose Ink skin tints. And that was the first time CoverGirl sent me PR. And I just felt like, well, if I'm gonna like start accepting PR from CoverGirl, I need to also like try some CoverGirl outside of what I'm being sent. So I bought that powder. It was in the same line, so I figured it would be really copacetic for me to buy and do not even like a review. I didn't think I was going to do a review on that foundation, but I was going to test it. And that product is actually really good, the foundation skin tint product. The powder was also very good. Now, it was nothing like the Chantecaille powder, because the Chantecaille powder is like just its own thing. And not that I think the Chantecaille powder is so special that I can't find something that does the same thing. It's just the texture of both of those powders is very different, and I do think the finishes were very different. The Simply Ageless powder I feel like would be really great for someone who has dry skin and doesn't have a lot of powdering needs. It did a soft blur effect, and I do feel like it did just the right amount of setting for someone who has drier skin than me. But I do have oily skin, and I did enjoy that powder, but for me to enjoy that powder would require a lot of touching up throughout the day, and that's like one thing that I'm not gonna do is touch up. Not only that, that powder doesn't have a mirror, which I think is totally fine because not having a mirror in it does keep the cost down. But if that was the powder I was taking, then I would also need to have another product on me, or I mean, I could use my phone, but like I find it easier to use just like a little compact mirror if I am gonna touch up out on the go. It wasn't the perfect powder for me, but I did think it was a beautiful product. I had really no complaints. I think the Simply Ageless line is really directed at people who are like middle-aged. It's like CoverGirl for people who are middle-aged. It all seems designed for people who have mature or maturing skin. And I think it works well. And so if your skin is dry, or you're changing into a dry skin type, it might be worth checking out. Or if you do need to use different powders in the winter, in the summer, like in the summer, you can get away with like more heavy duty powders. And then in the winter, you need like lighter powders. That might be something to check out. It's a lovely little powder, and I think it's worth it if you are looking for a powder at that price point. The thing when it comes to like this price point, and it was a one-off purchase, it wasn't like I bought a full face of CoverGirl in this purchase. It was like a powder. I enjoyed that powder. I feel like I used it a lot whenever I had it. It just wasn't the perfect powder for me, and that's why I passed on it. I don't think it was a bad purchase. Buying a powder like the Chantecaille powder, which is like now $80+ if you buy it at full retail value, which there are ways to buy this not full retail value. So to keep that in mind as well, if this was ever something that you were interested in. Buying like a $13 powder is just like not something I feel like I had to think that hard about. I would think more about a $40 powder. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, obviously there are people of different circumstances where like buying a $13 powder would be a big thing to think about. But for me, it wasn't that big of a deal to think about buying that powder. I think it was a good purchase. It wasn't my best purchase. The last thing I bought, the Lab Access release of Rituel de Fille's Creator Concealer, but it is now called the Sorcerer Concealer. And it is a little bit different. It's not exactly the same thing as what I have here. The component of this is not as good as the component of the final reveal, and I can't speak to the quality of the new concealer. I actually wasn't planning on buying this because I had such a bad experience loving the original foundation that they made whenever they did a lab access of the foundation to what came to market. But this was actually very different. They released this lab access release and the concealer came out the same year, but the foundation had, like, there was a lot that changed in the formula to when it came out, and it took a long time for that to happen. Technically, the foundation that I bought for the lab access release had expired by the time that the real foundation had come out. So everything that kind of happened after I bought this was a lot different than that first experience. So this was something I wasn't planning on picking up. And then I had some of like my budget left over. I do, if I haven't bought anything personally for myself that I'm interested in, I do kind of like put that just towards something that might be interesting to my audience. Everything that played out with this concealer was so strange. So I bought it, which I wasn't really sure if I was going to buy it, but some people were curious about it. I really like Rituel de Fille, even if everything I try for them isn't the best for me, my skin type, and what my needs are as far as makeup goes. I like what they're doing. Like, I like the concept of the brand. And they're an independent brand, but they're an independent brand that has a really large, vast offering of product. So there's just like a lot to love there and a lot to respect about Rituel de Fille. And Rituel de Fille is like one of those brands that like I fell in love with before, like I feel like the rest of the world did. I felt like it was like my little secret until it wasn't. At the time, I wasn't as well versed in concealer. Well, I'm not even the most well versed in concealer, but like concealer was like a very afterthought kind of product to me. It just like didn't seem like aligned. So I bought it, I tried it, and I liked it a lot. But then I didn't want to make it a habit of talking about it on the channel because it was a lab access release. Really shortly after I purchased it, you couldn't buy it anymore because it was a lab access release. Of course, I can use makeup on my channel that you can't buy anymore, and I do feel that way. Whenever this brand does the lab access release, they're looking for personal feedback. And I could certainly talk about it on my channel. I could certainly use it on my channel. But it just is like, and it doesn't make sense for the lab access releases to be something you talk about. Because a lot of the makeup that I talk about on my channel that you can't buy anymore is simply because like it was a limited edition thing or was a limited run thing. Not a thing that was like put out for a brief period of time with the intention of them, you know, updating the formula and then putting it out for real in a different format. Does that make sense? Hopefully this all makes sense to you. It just feels different with this purchase. So I tried it. I really liked it. I used it a couple times and then I just kind of like set it aside because I just was like, I just don't have a reason to use this other than for myself personally. And I put it in a quarantine box last year. And the whole purpose of that was like, if I put products in there and I don't think about them and I get to the end of the year, I could just declutter the ones that I didn't end up pulling back out. But I did go in and I pulled this back out and it's a fabulous product. I am very curious about the new formulation of this, like the one that is for sale right now. Very curious about it, but I have this and I can continue using it. It's the product I have all over my face. It's the concealer / foundation I have all over my face. It is so lovely. It is such a lovely product. It's really good. It's super high coverage and it is kind of a thicker formula. And I don't traditionally like a thicker formula of concealer. And I don't typically love high coverage much of anything. But this really looks like skin and has that full coverage capability. It's just so right. It's so unbelievably right. And it's such a confusing concealer. Like, it's just like, I can't believe they made this. I definitely think that this was worth my purchase. I don't know if all of my intentions and what I would normally look for in a product when I'm buying it for myself or the channel, like none of those things make sense. I wasn't really on the market for a concealer. I was using the Surratt Dewdrop concealer, like, and I was very happy with it. So I didn't need a new concealer personally. Like, only a handful of people really asked me to try the concealer whenever they were announcing that they were doing this lab access release. It was just such a strange like thing that I bought. And then it was also so wild how well it worked. Like, it was just like such a good product. And like, I was like, oh, so they nailed it. I don't know. It's like, it's really interesting. I, again, cannot speak to the current sorcery version, but I know that Teresa is Dead really loves it. And also my friend Andromeda also really loves it. And Andromeda has told me personally that they don't think it's very far off from this lab sample release. I haven't used this in a while because right now I am trying to finish up that Surratt Dewdrop Concealer, and I think I'm pretty close to being done with it. So I have had this quarantine, but since I was going to talk about this product on camera with you, I decided to put it on. So wow, it's just so great. I love it as a foundation, really. It's a good concealer, and I think it does look good on my under eye, but like I do prefer it all over the face. That's it. This is the only one that remains of the 3 things that I bought. It's not my best work in the month, and I feel like this was a stumbled into success story. I don't think it was a bust of a month either. I've certainly had busts of a month. I always want to come on here and be like, I still own all of these products and they were all good and I believe in them and that's why I still have them. But that can't be every month, can it? So I'm just pleased that, you know, I have one thing still in my makeup collection, and it was something that almost got decluttered, but like redeemed itself, even though it had nothing to redeem. It was just like I kind of forgot about it and I was like, well, I don't think I'm ever going to reach for this. And I did. I was like, why am I not reaching for this? Anyway, that wraps up the video. Do you remember what you bought last February? If you do, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know if you are still using that product, if you still love that product, if it brings you joy still, or if you decluttered it, or if it's something that you passed on or donated because it just really didn't work out for you. Let us know why. What should we be avoiding? What should we maybe be trying? Let us know. But if you are new to my channel, a lot of what I try to do on my channel is what I did here, is being really reflective of makeup that I purchased and using makeup that I've purchased. I do buy things to review and I do receive PR that I also can review, but I try to be very mindful about how I speak about those to you. Yes, I want to review them for you and I want to tell you how they are, but I also want to keep in check that my relationship with makeup is very different than yours. And also keeping in mind the state of the world right now. Do you really need to be buying makeup? Like, I try to keep all of that in mind when I'm talking to you about makeup. So if that sounds good to you, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. The like button's right next to it. So if you could hit that while you're down there too, I would really appreciate it. I'm on Patreon and I have channel memberships. You can find those linked down below. I do one additional video over there every single month. So go ahead and join if you are into that sort of thing. But if you do not want to, or you do not have the money, don't feel any pressure. I'm happy that you're here liking, commenting, and sharing my content. But if you are a current member or patron, I super appreciate you. I have a pinned comment. In that pinned comment are links to help people in Gaza, people who were affected by the fires in Los Angeles. And I also have an organization in Pittsburgh that I care a lot about called Sisters Pittsburgh, which is a trans Black-led organization that helps trans people in Pittsburgh find housing and get the things that they need. So if you can donate to all or any of those causes, I would really appreciate it. And that's going to wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to follow your host, and you'll find me. I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth to doubt.